Unit 8, shooting on the day. So in this unit, we're going to look at some of the issues I think are important about the day itself, about conduct, representation, the way you work, the way you might factor and organise your day. So let's start with the basic must. You need insurance, obviously. Indemnity, public liability, perhaps employees insurance to cover your colleagues and team. It needs to be appropriate cover. You cannot turn up at these shoots without insurance. That's an absolute must. And potentially make sure it has a global cover. If you start doing destination shoots and you haven't looked back to your paperwork, you need to make sure that you're covered. And of course, you need to cover your equipment. And think about what are the issues in your insurance around equipment. If you abandon equipment, if you leave it in the crew room, and when you come back it's gone, are you covered? So really do your due diligence on your paperwork and your insurance so you know you're properly covered on the day. So let's discuss that day itself. So when you arrive, I think you need to arrive professionally, you need to arrive early, be smart and professional. And what does that really mean? So I think also the type of photographer you are should reflect the type of work in which you conduct yourself. So if you are a documentary photographer, then I think, in my view, that your work and the way you work should be quite quiet, should be quite discreet. So I think you need to be thinking about, as a reportage approach, that how is the best way to get what you need photographically from this situation. And I think if you are looking at that kind of street shoot, that kind of documentary genre, then I think at the same time you need to not be larger than life. I think you need to be a bit more quiet, a bit more reserved, a bit more unobtrusive. I think you need to reflect what you say. So if your biography is and if your approach says a certain thing on your website, we are a group of discreet documentary photographers, you need to conduct yourself in that way. So I think if your approach is more editorial, more advertising, more fashion, and this is what they're buying into, and you turn up with a team of colleagues, assistants, bringing lights and so on, the couple portraits are constructed in this way, then I think it makes sense for you to be more vocal, to be more of a character and so on. So I think the way you conduct yourself needs to reflect the practice itself. And I think that needs to be conscious. These aren't separate things. Think about what your work is like, think about what you're selling, and make sure that's reflected in the work that you do on the day itself. So you might want to think about the day in different sections, as a section of prep and preparation of the ceremony, of the reception that follows the ceremony. And that period for me is always a challenging period. I'll come back to that in a minute. Then the dinner and the speeches, followed by the cake cutting, first dance in the evening. And what I always do is I break down the files into those sections. So after the wedding, when I've exported them, I'm not talking about processes and flows and so on in this course. It's merely about business. But when I give the images back, I make them digestible. I make them easy for the couples to understand what they're getting back from me in terms of folders. So they get them back in those stages, which makes it much more manageable for them to go to pictures, rather than saying throwing everything into one file that's a zip folder or so on. I have online galleries that's broken down into those sections. I mean, online galleries are very important in my view, and there's many of them around. Find the one that works for you. I work with Pixieset, and I think it's very manageable, easy from my point of view, but also from the client-facing point of view to use. And it's very clean. And I think that's really important. It also allows a privacy section. So couples are able to, if you supply a password, have some sort of super admin access so they can then control what other guests see. And I think that's a great thing to have. So I think, try and present your brand in this way. Don't just think, I'm going to just retransfer a folder. And I know there's more costs in having these online galleries, but I think they're worth it. And it adds more to your quality and more to your brand. I think conduct on the day is quite an important thing. I always say that my team, as I said, need to be smart and on time and conduct themselves discreetly and professionally. But there's also other important things for me. No smoking on my team and no alcohol at any point. And this is something that I've been doing for many years, and I think it's important. It's particularly if you're working with, say, a planner that's commissioned you or brought you in to shoot a wedding. So in a sense, you're representing that planner. So if you have a team member that's going for cigarette breaks, or the groom says to your team member, come and join me for a glass of wine, I think needs to be some kind of ethos within your brand and within yourself, if you're working on your own, that says, thank you so much, it's very kind. Maybe at the end, I'll speak to the planner about it as well. just put it in a way in which you're not refusing them outright, but at the same time you're just conducting yourself in a professional way, and just check with the planner and say, look, actually the groom's asked me for a drink at the end, how do you feel about that? I think on the day as well, you need to be open to change, open to adaptability. Try not to get frustrated, particularly with moments that are frustrating, like the groups that are taking longer than you expected, or even the couple photographs when you expect to have 10, 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes when you've only been given 15. I've had it so many times. I think you want to show some kind of like reliability, durability, adaptability in your work, and that the planners and the venues say, you know what, John delivered them back when they said. We said we wanted them back at 3. He gave them back at 1 minute to 3. Even if that means that they're only going to get 14 minutes back from me when I expected half an hour, I'm still doing what the venue's asking from me. And I think you need some kind of honesty with a couple. So you say, actually, I've only now got 15 minutes with you, just so you know, we were going to do half an hour, but we've got 15 minutes. So there's a kind of like constant like honesty and clarification with couples throughout. So for example, the couple have asked you to photograph a garden area in the reception. And let's just say time is running out. So I think you just want some kind of transparency here. So you would say, I'm running out of time. If I photograph the garden, I won't be able to photograph the couple shots as long as I want. Can we move things around? Can I go back to the garden later? Can we lose the garden? And so on. And you might even do that in groups. So if you've got 10 groups and you're on group number 7, and you've got 3 to go, but you're running through time, you need to say to the couple, we're over time, what should we do here? So I think there's some kind of just transparency. So they feel that they're in control, and then you don't say afterwards, oh, we didn't do it, I ran out of time, and so on. That you just know on the day, and you're informing them on the day how it's changing from the schedule. And that's also with the planner too. So everyone's quite clear about how, as the day shifts and adapts, and it will, that you are being clear about how you're reacting to it. I think that's an important professional approach that also, in a way, makes you clear of things, because you've been open about what you've been able to achieve and what you haven't been able to achieve, because the timescales have changed. I think it's important to make sure you're clued in on the schedule as well, whether there's a planner or not. If there is a planner, even better, because a planner would have a whole schedule of information and you can refer back to them and that source for finding out what's going on. And as things change, find out from the planner, is this happening still? Is this happening? How are we doing? How are we doing on the timings and so on? And that reflects with your team, so you inform your team. But also at any point, the couple might come to you. And that can happen a lot, that you are a point of reference, a point of call. And they might say to you, oh, what's happening next? Or what are we supposed to do now? And then you are saying to them, actually, this has happened, this is about to happen, and so on. And that adds a much more professional approach to what you're doing. You're in line with what's happening, either without the planner or with, but also then there's a reliability, rather than saying, oh, actually, I don't know, I'm just here to take pictures. It shows you a professional approach. I think that adds to your value as well. And couples remember that. They come back and say, not just the photos are amazing, you were amazing. You and your team were amazing. And that's what you want. You want that to come back through your brand, through testimonies and relationships with venues and relationships with planners.